Yan, pagkatapos kong mag-exercise, ito ang almusal ko. Okay. Yan. Diba? Okay kayo.
A few moments later.
At Denver International Airport.
Reject!
Continental Airlines Flight 1404 finally stops 700 feet from the runway. Fire engulfs the plane's right engine.
The cabin was starting to fill with smoke. I looked over at the left-hand overwing exit, and it was already open.
Passengers have only seconds to escape.
I carefully made it down the wing, got off onto the ground, and then turned and I immediately started walking up the hill. It hit me that, oh, I'm going to survive this.
Firefighters reach the 737. Fortunately, the leaking fuel has flowed down the slope away from the burning airplane and the escaping passengers. Despite sliding off the runway and crossing a taxiway and service road, all 110 passengers and 5 crew are alive.
It was amazing to me that we all walked away the way we did.
Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board arrive at the crash site. They need to figure out why Flight 1404 went off the runway.
It had gone off at a very high speed, went over these other roadways. It was mostly intact. The fuselage was burned along most of the right side, and some pretty significant impact damage as it went across the infield.
Investigators listen to the cockpit voice recorder.
Continental 1404, Denver Tower. Runway 34 right. Position and hold. Position and hold, 34 right. Continental 1404.
The conversation in the cockpit is entirely routine as the pilots complete their checklists while taxiing to the runway.
Looks like you got some wind out there.
And then something grabs their attention.
Look at them clouds moving. The pilots were looking up at the clouds and reporting how these low clouds at 4,000 feet were moving like at 50 knots.
But no reports mentioned airport winds exceeding 27 knots. So the captain proceeded as planned.
This airplane should be able to handle those kind of winds.
A 737-500 can handle crosswinds up to 33 knots. But if the gusts are stronger, might have been enough to blow the plane off the runway.
Investigators look into how winds are measured and reported at Denver International Airport. They start with the Automated Terminal Information Service, or ATIS.
So what were they being told about the winds? ATIS told them 11 knots.
Wind 280 degrees, 11 knots.
Oh, where did that speed come from? This weather tower, right here. That is miles from the runway.
In addition to ATIS, there are also dozens of wind shear sensors scattered around the airfield. Controllers use their data to provide pilots with localized wind information.
Continental 1404, wind at 270, at 27. The controller gave them a wind speed of 27 knots. Where does that reading come from? This sensor here, at the departure end of 34 right. It averages out wind speeds, sends them out every 10 seconds.
That means the pilots weren't getting the speed of every individual gust, only the average of several.
The average was 27 knots. Not enough to blow a 737 off a runway. Bet there's a heck of a gust in there.
Did the airport sensors miss a far stronger gust of wind? Perhaps one coming down from the nearby Rocky Mountains. Wind patterns created by the Rockies can produce strong gusts called mountain waves. Did a ferocious mountain wave blow Flight 1404 off the runway?
So we started looking at the upper air conditions, and we determined that mountain wave conditions with some strong downslope winds were occurring.
Experts from the National Center for Atmospheric Research create a computer model of the winds at the exact moment the plane left the runway.
Using this model, we came into surprising findings.
Impressive.
And it did show strong winds reaching a surface. Some of these winds were over 40 knots, all associated with mountain wave conditions.
None of the airport sensors reported strong wind gusts, just averages every 10 seconds.
Oh, the pilots wouldn't have known.
Shouldn't an experienced pilot like Captain Butler have been able to keep the plane under control?
How far outside the range of normal experience is this for airline pilots? And in order to answer that question, we had to actually get operational data.
Hey, Bill. You're not going to believe this.
Investigators learned that the vast majority of pilots have never had to deal with this situation. Out of 250,000 takeoffs in the 737, only 4 were hit with crosswinds stronger than 30 knots. The pilots on Flight 1404 faced gusts in excess of 40 knots.
The odds that a pilot is going to encounter that kind of crosswind, it's not even guaranteed that they will encounter it in their career as an airline pilot.
Despite the extremely rare crosswind, everyone on board Continental Flight 1404 survived the crash. Investigators recommend new Federal Aviation Administration guidelines requiring air traffic controllers to provide wind data to pilots from multiple sources.
The crew made a prudent decision once they realized that they were losing control of the airplane to take the necessary steps to ensure the best outcome for the passengers. Yes, it's off the runway, but they're survivors, and that's the important part.
11 years before all these passengers escaped death, passengers on a Korean Airlines flight suffer a very different fate.
Whether it's feeding thousands of people, reuniting long-lost family, or taking people on the voyage of a lifetime, behind the scenes is an army of dedicated staff.
When we managed to make happy 2,000 customers in one day, it's a big accomplishment.
Get to know the people behind our restaurants, airlines, and cruise ships. Secrets of Tonight at 9 on National Geographic.
This is what you have to do. Keep your eyes open.
Apoy ba?